Okay, so this is about when we're going to start discussing various memes. We're going to discuss this thing that I made, and you are welcome to add your commentary. I'm going to kind of just go through it all first, and when we're done, then we can have, I don't know, like the thoughts about it section, right, where I offer my thoughts. So not recently, 3 hours ago, I made a post on the subreddit, about um, how people feel about Seiso or Yabai attitudes, right? And personality traits and things like that. And I was intentionally pretty vague. I will admit that I was intentionally pretty vague because what it means really varies, and I wanted to sort of get a temperature read on how people see Seiso versus Yabai. If you don't really know what Seiso versus Yabai is, I will sort of explain it. Um, Seiso more or less has a wholesome and upright connotation. Family friendly in some respects, but it just has a more pure vibe. And Yabai has a um, sort of like adult humor, edgy, lewd, out there, um, that sort of vibe, right? It's hard to pin down exactly what it means, especially for English speakers, right? And I'm not going to try to do that because I believe that language is transformative. It's actually not important to me what the true and real meanings of the word are. I could go look it up, and it's important to me outside of this context, but within the context, it isn't, because I don't think that everyone else knows what those terms mean. So it's actually more important what people think the term means rather than what it actually means. Because language is transformative, language changes. So I made two polls. I made one for male presenting and one for female presenting that was essentially, hey, if you're a male presenting VTuber, or sorry, not if you're a male presenting VTuber, if you are watching a male presenting VTuber, right? I prefer when my male presenting VTuber is generally either a little Yabai, a little Seiso, both, or I don't really care, right? And I offer the same question for female presenting VTubers. And the reason I did this, you can kind of follow along, is I was curious to see what the dispositions around VTubers were depending on the gender of the VTuber. It's my impression, based on the general scene, that there are different viewer attitudes depending on whether the viewer sees their VTuber as male presenting or female presenting, and the sort of things that they like to see from there. It's my hypothesis based on anecdotal evidence, what people say in the subreddit, what people say in VTuber chats, how people clip and respond, just a general sense of how things were, and I wanted to test my hypothesis a little bit. So, one thing I want to make clear, and I try to make that clear here, is that it's not really easy for someone to definitively state this is why people prefer male VTubers act this way or female VTubers act that way, right? I think a lot of people have their own nuanced reasons. Viewers have their own reasons. If you ask 10 different people, you'll get 10 different answers. And a lot of that, I think, comes from, as I mentioned, confounding factors, what someone's tolerance is for certain kinds of behavior, and whether they're coming into this from the anime scene, where there's a certain cultural expectation, or whether they're coming into it from other parts of the VTuber scene, right? Where is their window of what is Seiso versus Yabai, right? And I really wanted to try to see what sort of content, here we go, like what sort of content is preferred depending on the VTuber's gender presentation, right? Now, in my case, my gender presentation is a little wibbly wobbly, and that's sort of on purpose, which is honestly a big part of why I was curious, right? Because this is not a very male model, right? It's not like super masculine. I don't have huge pecs. I don't have like shoulders that are 3 city blocks wide, and so on, right? But you can hear my voice, and you can probably tell that this is not exactly a feminine voice. So I had a personal stake in this. So before we go into what the data is, and I'll scroll up a little bit so you can't see it yet, I want to talk about what are known as confounding factors, right? I think they're called confounding factors in science. Basically, things that will skew the result of the data, right? Things that you didn't really account for or couldn't hold constant that will make the data look like something else is happening because you didn't control for a variable. And what that means is if you're trying to see how fast do balloons rise, right? Here's a good example. How fast do balloons rise? You might say, well, I want to test how fast balloons rise depending on how much helium I put in them. If I put in 10 times the helium, will the balloon rise faster or not? And will it make a significant change in how fast it rises? But if you don't control for example, the type of balloon that you're using, right? You might end up with a different balloon shape, right? One type of balloon might constrain the helium-filled balloon more or less, and so you might end up with some air resistance situation. Or if you're not controlling for temperature, right? If you're not saying, well, I want to test this at 80 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Or 32 degrees Celsius? So 80 Fahrenheit to Celsius? This does not work? Okay. I'll think about it. I'll think about it. Point being, right? If the air temperature is different, depending on when you run your tests, that may also change the results, because maybe if it's 90 degrees outside, there's less air that's causing the balloon to rise more slowly, right? Or more quickly, or something like that. There's less buoyant force. Who knows? If you don't keep all of those factors constant, and you don't quote unquote control for those variables, you might end up in a situation where your data looks like something is happening when really the cause is not what you're testing for. The cause is some unrelated thing, like how sunny is it? How hot is it today? What's the temperature? What's the wind speed? What balloon model are you using? Etc., etc., etc. Instead of, hey, does putting more helium into the balloon cause it to rise faster? Right. So that's what kind of confounding factors are. And I have a lot of confounding factors, which is a big reason why I will say, in big disclaimer words, right? Please be aware of this. The conclusions reached here are not reliable. You cannot really make a conclusive, definitive statement from what I am presenting here today. It won't help you, right? There's a lot of reasons why the data is just not reliable. So rather than saying this is a conclusive statement, we should maybe look at it as a trend, perhaps, or just here is a small bit of anecdotal information. It's not really enough to form a strong, definitive conclusion, right? sample size matters. And here's a big one, right? Here, I'll go right to the second one. There were only 22 responses for the male presenting poll and 21 responses for the female presenting poll. A sample size N of 22 or 21 is really, really low. It's really, really low. And anytime that you have a sample size that's really, really low, you will struggle with reliability. Why is that important and why does that matter? I'll give you an example. If you survey a whole bunch of people, right, and you opt into the survey, you might get the people who are most passionate, right? Let's say that you're sitting in your high school lunch area and you just have a stand up and you're like, spend 5 minutes and fill out my survey, please. Well, there's a chance, a good chance, that you get maybe the people who are most passionate and are willing to spend 5 minutes filling out that form instead of doing whatever it is they're doing during lunch, right? Maybe you'll never get the people who are spending their lunch periods maybe running track or out in the field, right? So you simply won't get that population of people. And so you might end up with a very vocal minority. You might end up accidentally excluding people who just wouldn't be able to take that survey or aren't online at the time to see it or aren't there in the area, aka I posted the polls at 9 p.m. Pacific and maybe all the Europe bros just didn't see it, right? That's possible. So sample size matters, right? Sample size matters. I touched on this before, levels of tolerance, right? And basically what I go through here is I think everyone has their own concept of what is Seiso versus what is Yabai, right? Their own tolerance level and their own expectation, because everyone is coming from everyone has come into this from a different perspective. Some people are very ingrained in the anime culture and they may be more accepting of certain parts of the culture, right? Some people may not be. Some people may be from that culture and go, this is still not appropriate. Who knows, right? It also depends on what kind of person, what kind of VTubers you're watching, right? There are many VTubers out there who might be a bit more yabai in general, right? And in that case, maybe someone who's a bit more relaxed but still maybe not super wholesome might just look more wholesome in comparison. Everyone has their own tolerance, right? The sorts of things that a male presenting VTuber might say might be taken as, oh, boys are being boys. And so it's really hard to pin down, right, what behavior is considered Seiso or Yabai, because each person has their own subjective viewpoint on it and their own concept of what that should or shouldn't be, right? Some people consider ASMR not wholesome, right? But there may be a very fluffy comfort ASMR creator who doesn't swear, and are they Seiso? Some people would say no, some people would say yes, right? There's not really one answer. So, for that reason, levels of tolerance is definitely a confounding factor. It's hard to simply pin down that this is that behavior. How could we fix this? We could have a more detailed survey, right? Or we could ask someone not what do they think about the VTubers, but what do they think about the VTubers in relation to the general society around them, right? But even then you get confounding answers because someone may be from a more modest culture. And, you know, everyone comes from their own place. There's nothing wrong with that. Another confounding factor I pointed out right at the beginning, and we'll just jump to it, is that I used some slightly ambiguous terms, and gender is a bit of a spectrum. It is a bit of a gray area, right? And I said male presenting and female presenting in the polls because I wanted to find some way to split the polls in terms of the viewer experience. But there are a few problems with that. And problem one is what a viewer perceives may not be what a VTuber presents, right? If you have two non-binary VTubers and one has a very masculine voice and one has a very feminine voice, but both of them have androgynous models, you will get different results for, is one male presenting, is the other female presenting? That's just kind of hard to avoid. And it's just a reality of, the messy reality of life, that people are what they are, right? Some people may be on their journey to something else. You just don't know, right? And we have a lot of ambiguity sometimes in the VTuber world. We have a fair number of what are known as femboys, right? And whether or not a viewer looks at someone like that and goes, while this person may be male, in my mind, I kind of clock them as female presenting, as feminine, and therefore my expectations for this person as a content creator are more in line with what I would expect from a female presenting VTuber, right? Or a female content creator. There's just no accounting for that, right? There's really no way I can look at each person who filled out this poll and go, are you, acting in this way? And frankly, it wouldn't make sense to do so, right? It wouldn't make sense to do so because we are talking about viewer expectations right now. And although it would be nice if viewer expectations and content creator presences and the way that content creators present themselves were always perfectly in line, there are always misunderstandings. That's humanity, right? The way that we present ourselves is not always perceived in the way we want it to be. And so we just kind of have to accept that this confounding factor exists, that you may have a content creator who is not perceived the way that they wish to be, right? And we are kind of looking at, how do I put this? We are looking at content creators from the lens of the viewer, right? What are the viewer's expectations? So that's definitely one factor. Another factor is I made a mistake. I actually swapped the order of the first two options in the poll. I blame Reddit for this. I do. I blame Reddit for this because you are not allowed to make polls on the desktop website. You are only allowed to make polls on the Reddit application, the phone application. And so I had to open that up and type up the whole poll and hope it didn't get messed up. And I thought I checked it correctly, but I didn't, apparently. So, skill issue for me, but it is a factor, right? If I want to keep as many things the same as possible, this is definitely something to bring up. Another factor is that I put this poll up for 3 days, but the nature of Reddit and social media is that pretty soon it gets washed away. It moves off to somewhere else, people don't really see it, and therefore you're just kind of sitting in Narnia going, oh man, that poll will just not get attention. If it doesn't get a lot of attention relatively quickly, it won't show up in people's feeds, so they won't answer the poll. I actually found myself very surprised that I got 22 votes and 21 votes at all. I was expecting like 5 to 10, if at all. So thank you, everyone who voted, by the way. I appreciate that a lot. But it's worth noting, right, that just the nature of social media makes polls when you don't have a big following tough. And even if you make a poll with a big following, you're going to have people who are predisposed to your viewpoint. So social media polls just have some limitations, right? Finally, I had 4 options in the poll. I had, looking at the male presenting version, I had a little Yabai, a little Seiso, both or I don't really care. Either, neither, whatever. One might argue that either is another way of saying both. Those two things sort of have some overlap, and so it's hard to really separate those out, but I added in I don't really care because, frankly, ambivalence is a very valid response to what kind of content do you want to see from a VTuber? Going, it's not really about whether they're wholesome or lewd. It's not really about that. It's just about the content for me, right? Is a different mindset than, oh, I like it when someone's comfortable and makes both lewd and wholesome content and jokes like that, right? And that they can be a little flirty, but they're also serious when they need to be. That is totally different from, I don't really care about this person's personality. I'm only here for their gameplay, right? That's also a thing that happens on Twitch and YouTube, right? So I separated them out for that reason. I think I was kind of right to do so based on the way that the votes were split, but those are all the factors I could think of. If you can think of more, by the way, please let me know in the comments of the video that will show up on YouTube later, or in the comments of the Twitch or YouTube chat right now. We're live. Because we're live is what I said. Yeah, my caption thing will not be great. It'll not be perfect. I regret it all because it's going on YouTube, but we'll just carry on. All right, so how about the data? Well, let's get to the data. Okay, here's the data. Here's the data. More or less, we can see that the highest response is for both Seiso and Yabai. People generally want someone who can do both, right? Is comfortable doing both. I'm going to hold my opinions on why this might be and what these represent until after we get through the entire presentation, and then we'll talk about the conclusions a little bit, right? And I'll probably cut that out for the YouTube stream, but you can probably find it on the live VOD. Just, go find the rest. All right. Notably, male presenting VTubers, second is I don't care, actually. I don't care at all. And then a little Seiso, and then fewest votes for being Yabai, right? Yabai. Other way around, female presenting VTubers, lots of votes for both, and then a little Yabai, and then I don't really care, and then a little Seiso. That's the data. That's the thing. And I'm going to repeat again, it's hard to definitively make any conclusions because there are only 22 and 21 votes. There's just not that many, right? The sample size is very small. But here are the trends, right? Both male and female presenting VTubers are preferred to be a mixture. For male presenting VTubers, it is least preferred to be Yabai. For female presenting VTubers, it is least preferred to be mainly Seiso. Those are the apparent trends. Now I'll scroll down to the bottom and remind everyone of some things. First of all, again, I have to say it, I just have to keep saying it. This data cannot be used to make definitive conclusions. The sample size is small. There's tons of confounding factors. This is 20 or 22 votes of virtual YouTubers has how many members? I can't even see it. I think it's like 660K. It might be 600K. Either way, it's a massive, massive number, right? This just isn't that many people, right? And it's only people on Reddit. So keep that in mind. And I also have to point out, and this is also very important, I tried to point this out in the text as well. Please don't take this to mean that you can't be a Seiso female VTuber, right? Or that you can't be a Yabai male VTuber. That's not what I'm saying. There are some pretty great counter examples out there. Fauna from HoloLive is a great example of a very wholesome, family-friendly streamer, right? That's totally fine. It's honestly totally fine. right? I think there's also a yandere boyfriend niche on YouTube for VTubers. I think. I don't know, but I think that's true, based on a few conversations I've had. So do what you want. Do what is fun for you. It is your VTuber journey, right? If you are a VTuber and you are listening to this, it is your VTuber journey. You have rights. You have the rights to do what you want. Okay? Just keep that in mind. That's all the data that I have. That's the trends, the conclusions. But it's worth thinking about. It's worth looking at. It's worth observing. So I'm going to give us a little bit of a pause, maybe